Good afternoon and welcome to the AEC Fair Trade Update 5-Year Sunset Review. Joining us today are Paul Zucker and Derek Holt of Wiley-Rein. I am Jeff Henderson, AEC President. Paul and Derek will brief us today on what is happening with the Fair Trade 5-Year Sunset Review, and will go over instructions on the paperwork required. Please note that all computer, audio, and telephone lines are muted, so if you have questions during the webinar, select the Q&A from the toolbar and type your question in the dialog box, and we will address your questions at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, questions can be answered in a follow-up email. Feel free to email me directly at jhenderson@tso.net. Paul Zucker is an international trade analyst with Wiley-Rein. Paul has more than 25 years of experience consulting with clients on all aspects of injury analysis in front of the U.S. ITC and other U.S. government agencies, including the Department of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative. Having assisted hundreds of companies prepare responses to injury questionnaires and analyze thousands of responses, he is one of the most experienced injury analysts inside or outside of the government. Derek Holt is an associate at the firm. Derek represents clients in a variety of international trade matters, including anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigations, export controls, and sanctions compliance programs. Wiley-Rein itself, just a note about Wiley-Rein, they are our legal counsel in our trade orders against the Chinese. In 1983, Wiley-Rein opened its doors with 39 attorneys and a mission to establish a distinctly Washington, D.C. firm providing exceptional, effective legal services and genuinely superior service. In December 2014, Wiley-Rein acquired Signal Group as a wholly owned subsidiary, creating a Washington, D.C. legal, advocacy, and communications powerhouse. I'll end the introductions there, so we have more time for the point of our meeting. So now join me in welcoming Paul Zucker and Derek Holt. Paul and Derek, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. So today we're going to go over the Sunset Review ITC questionnaires for U.S. producers. So first, I'd just like to start off. We're going to start off with a brief overview of the ITC Sunset proceeding and the timeline for the review. Next, we'll jump right into the questionnaire and review it section by section. Third, we'll explain what additional information that we may need from you. And then finally, we'll take at least 5 to 10 minutes to address any additional questions from AEC members. So the Sunset Review process is basically a top-to-bottom review of an anti-dumping or countervailing duty order, asking whether that order should remain in effect. This takes place every 5 years after an order is imposed. On Sunset Review, the ITC asks whether the order would lead to a continuation or recurrence of injury to the domestic industry. Unlike an original anti-dumping investigation, which looks at past behavior by foreign producers or exporters, a Sunset Review attempts to predict the future impact of removing an order. In the Sunset Review, the ITC will issue questionnaires to U.S. producers, foreign producers, importers, and purchasers of aluminum extrusions. And these questionnaires will cover production, sales, purchases, and also financial results. The ITC will use these questionnaires to compile its pre-hearing staff report, which is a comprehensive report on the state of the domestic industry, the state of the foreign competition, and the U.S. aluminum extrusion market. With respect to the timeline of this Sunset Review, we anticipate that the final questionnaires will be released by the end of October 2016. Once the final questionnaires are released, we'll have the questionnaires placed on the AEC website. The responses to these questionnaires are due on November 29th, 2016. we ask that if you please submit any draft questionnaires to us by Tuesday, November 15th, 2016, so that we can assist you with any other issues that you may have. There will be a hearing similar to the hearing in the original investigation. That hearing will be January 26, 2017. The commission will vote on March 10th, 2017, and a determination will be delivered on March 27th, 2017. Now, let's jump right into the U.S. Producers Questionnaire, right? So the questionnaire that you see on your screen right now, it's a draft of the U.S. Producers Questionnaire. The ITC hasn't released this final U.S. Producers Questionnaire as of this moment, so we're going to go through this draft questionnaire today. As an initial matter, in a draft questionnaire, the ITC is asking for 5 years of data, 5 years plus.
5 3/4 years.
We believe that collecting 5 years of data may be a significant burden on the members of the AEC. So we've asked the ITC to limit the data to only 3 years, plus the interim period, which is from January to September. We'll know whether the ITC accepts our position when it issues the final questionnaires. Now, the purpose of the ITC questionnaire is really for companies to tell their story. And they tell their story in 2 ways. The first way is through reporting its data. And as we'll go through, it's a 56-page questionnaire. And the ITC is going to ask you to report your trade, your financial data. They're asking you to report pricing data. And the data that you report to the commission, it will be what it is. The data is going to be what it is. If your production, your shipments, your profits increase over the period of review, then that's what the data is going to show. The second way to tell your story in the ITC questionnaire is through the narrative responses. In these responses, you can explain your data. You can explain whether there's been improvements to your company through the result of the orders. You can explain what the effects will be if the commission removes the order and the Chinese are allowed to flood back into the market as they did in the original investigation. So don't be afraid to tell your story in these narrative responses. Now, we're going to start moving with the U.S. Producer Questionnaire, and we're going to go to part 1. The first part, you just kind of fill out your information, your authorized official, you put their name, email address. Most of this part is self-explanatory. Part 1, which is just general information, it covers whether you support the orders. It discusses ownership information. It also asks you information on related parties. So if you have any affiliated Chinese producers, or if you're related to importers that import Chinese extrusions, you will put that information in part 1 of the questionnaire response. The other thing that we would like to point your attention to is question 1.8. The questionnaire asks whether you produce heat exchange systems and kitchen appliance components. In the beginning of the Sunset Review, 2 importers requested that the ITC find that heat exchange systems and kitchen appliance components are different and separate from aluminum extrusions. As a result, the ITC has asked U.S. producers to provide information specifically on heat exchange systems and also kitchen appliance components. So in the questionnaire, the ITC instructs you to report in parts 2 and 3 any data that you have on heat exchange systems and kitchen appliance components together with all of your information. In part 5, they ask you to break this information out in the questionnaire. Jumping to part 2. In part 2 of the questionnaire, the U.S. Producers Questionnaire, you have several places where the ITC is requesting narrative responses. And we want to make sure that you pay particular attention to these questions so that you'll be able to tell your story to the Commission. The first question is question 2.2, which discusses changes in operations. And they're asking whether any of these changes in terms of plant openings, closings, expansions, relocations, any consolidations, shutdowns, labor agreements, has any of this stuff happened since 2011 when the orders were imposed? This is where you want to explain the effect of the aluminum extrusions order as they relate to your operations. Were you able to open up a plant? Were you able to expand any of your existing facilities? And if so, could you have opened up the plant or expand any of your facilities if the orders were not in place? If you had a shutdown or curtailment in production, you can explain why in this section. Were aluminum extrusions from China a cause of any production shutdowns or curtailments of production? If you were affected by any aluminum extrusions from China that may have been circumventing the order, you can also put that information in this area. In question 2.3, the ITC asks about anticipated changes in operations. This is along the same lines where the ITC is asking you whether the Chinese producers, and if there's any effect that the aluminum extrusions from China have had on your operations. They want you to point to any documents that you have and in terms of business plans or anything that you use for any assumptions, if you have those, and include them in your responses.
And let me just suggest that this is something that we rarely, if ever, do. There's almost never a case where your business plans and internal documentation are going to be 100% our way, and so we tend to review or construe these questions very narrowly. Plainly, if you have something that is labeled aluminum extrusions business plan and projections in the future, it's hard for us to say you don't have it. But if you don't have something that's specifically labeled that way, yeah, we're probably going to ask you to provide it to us, and then we'll review it before we submit it to the Commission. And if you look plainly, questions 2.3 and 2.4 are sort of companion questions. One says, in light of the fact that the order has been in place, what changes do you anticipate doing in the future? And then question 2.4 is sort of, well, would that change if we got rid of the order on Chinese extrusions? And they're distinguishing here between the CVD order and the AD order. To be honest, they don't really expect you guys to distinguish between AD and CVD orders. They only really expect lawyers and economists to make that distinction. So your answer pretty much, I suspect, whenever they ask you that, is going to be something along the lines of no, because you all don't really pay that much attention to what particular order there is in place, but rather what sort of protection you're being afforded. So again, companion questions here. One is, in light of the order being in place, what are your future plans? And then the next one is, how would that change if we get rid of the orders? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. And then, and especially, whatever changed, this is the time to reach back in your memory and, go back to what happened in 08, 09, and 10. And, without the trade discipline of AD and CVD orders, how would your company fare? So we're going to move down to questions 2.5 and 2.5 through 2.8. These are more of data questions. So Paul is going to kind of walk you through some of these questions and explain how to, or what the commission is looking for in these questions.
So here we are. Question 2.5 in all of its many parts basically goes to the concept of whether your production capacity can shift between aluminum extrusions on one hand and any other product on the other. If you're only producing aluminum extrusions, the capacity number that you report here is going to be the same as the capacity number that you report in 2-6. If, on the other hand, you are producing other types of extrusions on any piece of shared equipment, then it may be necessary to allocate that shared capacity between aluminum extrusions on the one hand and all other products on the other. And the ITC, when it comes to allocations, they like simple, easy to understand allocation rules. So if you allocate your capacity or any other thing, more or less on the quantity of production or shipments or whatever the measure might be, they'll probably accept that. And if you're okay with that, then that's great. But you might also be in a position where production of the aluminum extrusions or the other products doesn't really cut across a production quantity weighting. Maybe it takes you twice as long to produce the other extrusions. In that case, it's perfectly acceptable to say, all right, I allocated my production capacity on this basis. Time, shipment, employees, sales, whatever measure makes sense in your operation. But again, simple is better. ITC likes simple. ITC understands quantity measures. That's probably your best bet. Having said that, again, the capacity that we report here in 2-5A relates to the capacity that we report in 2-6. It's going to be identical if you're only producing extrusions, and it is going to be a subset of your overall production capacity that you report in 2-6. Similarly, production of aluminum extrusions that you report in 2-5A should match up to the production that we report in 2-6. If it doesn't, expect a question from the ITC staff. That's what they're going to do. And plainly, if you guys are producing something other than aluminum extrusions, you simply fill in the data and identify what it is you're producing. There's going to be a number of questions about how you calculate your capacity, how many hours per week, basically how many shifts are you running. For most folks, capacity is going to be based on your nameplate capacity. If you have a reason not to use your nameplate capacity, well, that's great. 2-5C gives you a place to explain why. Similarly, 2.5D, where they talk about production constraints, what the ITC in their mind is looking for is you saying something, XYZ piece of equipment is our constraint on capacity. We can only put this much through, et cetera, et cetera. Typically, it's been our experience that most people have available capacity, so the constraint is more market-based. We just don't have enough orders. This is going to be a little bit more loose than it was in the original investigation, where plainly we wanted to say, look, it's the imports that are constraining our production, it's nothing else. So again, product shifting, just what we talked about. Are you producing? Can you do it? What factors do you consider when you shift? How long does it take? How much does it cost? And again, it's been my experience that for most manufacturing firms, it's not that, it's that we produce what people order, and something along those lines. Question 2.6, the important points to note here, we've already talked about capacity and production, matching up to the previous question. Inventories, beginning and ending, this is finished goods only, not work in process. So in the ITC's mind then, the sum of beginning inventories and production minus total shipments, which is the sum of U.S. commercial shipments, internal consumption, transfers, and exports, should equal end of period inventories. In the real world, that rarely happens. You have scrappage, you have waste, you have loss. I doubt you have too much stuff, but it's possible. Again, you can explain that in a response to a question, but if you report inventories that do not reconcile, regardless of whether you explain it or not, you can anticipate getting a question from the staff. So for most people, that means they report data where the inventories reconcile, and because they usually have good accounting records on shipments and inventories, production by necessity becomes the swing variable that makes everything reconcile. And we can justify this based on their definitions that it really only becomes production once it's a finished product. Kind of odd, but this is the ITC. You will again see footnotes where you basically review much of the items you've already mentioned. How do we calculate capacity? You'll identify your export markets. None of this is really terribly meaningful. They have, right now, they are breaking out your commercial U.S. shipments into two channels of distribution: resellers and end users, basically. Keep an eye out on this. Quite often, between the draft producer questionnaire and the final questionnaire, they like to add in channels of distribution. You'll find that they've filled in reconciliation formulas for you so that you know to get things to match up: the reconciliation of inventories and shipments and production, and the reconciliation of the commercial shipments to the various channels of distribution. Employment data, very important, because injury to employees, the threat of injury to employees counts as material injury, or the threat, the recurrence of material injury in the language of the Sunset Review. Now, again, your data are just going to be what your data are. We don't know what they're going to look like, but hopefully, we will be able to explain what the trends are in that answer there. Purchases, the only thing to be really cognizant of with regard to purchases is this is where you report transactions where you are not the importer of record. If you are the importer of record, those transactions get reported in the importer questionnaire. Much of what we discuss about the data here in the producer questionnaire are just as applicable to the importer questionnaire. So if any of you are importers, well, you get to use this information as you fill that one out as well. Most of the rest of the stuff in 210, quite honestly, is sort of either the chance to tell your story or a check the box. Have you had a toll agreement? Toll agreements are basically, for your purposes, subcontractors. Right? Are you using subcontractors? Now read the specific agreement of definition of toll agreement, where the first firm furnishes the raw materials and the second firm uses it. So maybe you supply an extrusion to a heat treater, the heat treater heats it, sends it back to you. That might be an example of it. And again, this is just check the box, describe it. They are going to send the questionnaire to the people you identify, and they are going to try and count the profits that they get from their transactions with you as part of industry profits. foreign trade zones? Do you or don't you work in a foreign trade zone? Do you know if others are in foreign trade zones? And as we discussed, are you the importer of record where you are responsible for paying the duties, or are you the first consignee? Very straightforward. We sort of already discussed questions 213 to 14, but in many ways, this is the heart of the inquiry.
This is another question that you can tell your story. And, you know, the commission is asking for you to explain how effective the AD and CVD orders have been. You know, you can compare the time period from when the aluminum extrusions flooded the U.S. and devastated the market, and to the period after the imposition of the orders, and just make that comparison and, you know, provide it for the commission. Again, in 214 is the companion question, and this question is where you can explain to the commission, you know, how would the landscape be if the orders weren't in place? You know, while you may not be printing money in your basement, you know, would your business be operating at the level it is right now if the Chinese were allowed to come back in the market? You know, would you be able to invest in your company if the Chinese were able to come back in the market without paying duties? Will you be able to hire as many workers and provide jobs in your community if the Chinese were able to come back into the U.S. market? So the next question are part 3, which is the financial information. And here's more data information that the commission is going to want to obtain from you, and Paul can walk you through some of this information too.
Okay, I will note that David Boylan, the name that you see listed up here, he's the ITC staff accountant and auditor. He's a CPA. I've worked with him many times, and he was the accountant/auditor in the original investigation, so he is going to be familiar with extrusions and with issues specific to your industry. So he's not going to be surprised by any of it, and for us, that's good news. You'll see that the first page is really just basic, kind of check the box. When does your fiscal year end? Where do you prepare financial statements? That sort of thing. Briefly describe your cost accounting system. If it's necessary for you guys to allocate, what basis did you use? Again, remember what I said? ITC loves simple allocation methods, quantity produced, dollars of sales, things along those lines, head count, whatever it is. As long as we have a clear methodology that Boylan can follow if he chooses to audit you, that is, verify your response. We simply have to be able to say, here are our books and records, and here is the straightforward methodology we use where necessary to go from our books and records to the data that are contained in the questionnaire response. And as long as he can follow that and come up with the same results, you're golden. So hopefully it won't be super hard on you, other than the fact that they right now want to go back 5 3/4 years. Question 3.5 is similar to what we were talking about with the shared capacity. Just what other products are you producing on the same facilities that you produced your extrusions? What share of sales? This is interpreted by some people to be a quantity amount. It's interpreted by other people to be a dollar amount. Knock yourselves out. I've never seen the ITC really question it all that much. Questions 3.6 through 3.8 go into what raw materials, if any, what goods and services you are getting from related companies. Plainly, the concern that they're trying to get at here is they don't want you to be reporting massive losses because your related upstream supplier is charging you twice the market price for your goods. Or similarly, they don't want, and that's sort of what the information on company transfers And internal consumption is sort of the reverse side of that. They don't want you to be losing money because you are selling to related parties at below cost. So that's sort of what this goes to. Again, this is just very fact-based. Do you purchase inputs? If you do, please identify them and tell us what the share of your total COGS are and what methodology are you using. Is it cost? Is it cost plus? Is it fair market value? Whatever you're using, you just lay it out here. And then they ask, hey, finally, are you reporting it to us the same way you account for it in your books and records? And that should be how you report it. It is consistent with your books and records. If there is some reason that you shouldn't, please let us know beforehand. But pretty much everything should flow right out of your books and records, with the only adjustments being necessary allocations as required. So with that, we have 39A. This is the profit and loss. Again, very important to the Commission's assessment of the industry. The sales quantities and sales values that we report here should, by and large, match up to what we reported in Section 2. The one difference might be if you have a fiscal year that does not end December 31st. Even there should be some sort of relationship that you could show the difference between the fiscal and the calendar and how you calculate it. Other than that, this is a straightforward P&L limited to your production of aluminum extrusions in your U.S. facilities. So you're not including any resales of extrusions. You're not including resales of imported extrusions. You're not reporting sales of non-aluminum extrusions. So only aluminum extrusions produced in your U.S. facilities fall into 39A and 39A, both for the annual data and for the January-September data. If you do report on a fiscal year basis, that is a fiscal year that does not end on December 31st, I hate to tell you that the ITC does in fact expect you to report fiscal year data in 39A for the calendar for the years, and calendar year data in 39A continued for the interim period. So it's the ITC, and we've tried to get them to change that, but they simply won't. So that is the way it is, and that's how they'll do it. You'll see in 39B, they are asking you, does everything reconcile? Do the calculated fields add up? Do the things match up to the data we reported in Section 2? If not, explain why. Question 310 goes to non-recurring items, what in accounting parlance is usually known as extraordinary items, extraordinary charges or revenues. Again, you may have had shutdowns, you may have had write-offs, you may have had lower of cost or market adjustments. All of these items, again, very fact-based. Just, did you have them? Where were they included in the P&L? And they asked us again in 311. Asset values, again, to the extent that you need to allocate between aluminum extrusions and other products, basis of production, sales, whatever makes the most sense for your operations. They do expect you to net out the depreciation and allowances, so it would be a net total asset net basis. You will undoubtedly have some aluminum extrusion specific assets, ending inventories, if nothing else. But anything that is a shared asset should be allocated on that net basis to aluminum extrusions. Again, quantity or sales are usually the methods chosen, but if you've got a more complicated method and can explain it, knock yourself out. Capital expenditures, R&D, very much the same thing. Again, these are on fiscal year basis rather than calendar year, except for January, September. Capital expenditures are pretty much anything designed to improve your plant and equipment, or your production process. R&D expenses, this gets a little bit more problematic, and most manufacturing operations that I'm aware of, R&D tends to just get reported in COGS data until the year-end audit, when the accountants and CPAs come in and say, voila, this much gets reported as R&D. Yeah, whatever it is, that, whatever the accountants basically tell you, but for those of you who do specifically track R&D, thank you. Okay, again, we see the question about consistency and reconciliation. This is where they're specifically saying, hey, if you got calendar year, fiscal year, the data you reported in Part 2 should match up to the data you reported in Part 3. Question 315, this is a place where we get to, again, as Derek says, make our story, that is our explanation of how the existing orders have improved our financial position if we want to, but more generally, 315 is where we tell them that their questionnaire is not working the way they anticipate.
So the next part is the pricing, product, and market factors information that the ITC is requesting. This may look familiar to the original investigation if you had an opportunity to participate in the original investigation. The five products are the same. The original investigation had 2 additional products. One of them were the heat sinks, which are not included in this questionnaire. With respect to the questionnaire in draft form, the questionnaire has alloy designations for each pricing product. We have asked the Commission to eliminate the alloy designation. We understand that there's been changes in the industry where some of these products are being made with different alloys.
Okay, so Part 4, and in fact, the rest of the questionnaire that we are now going to falls under the provenance of the ITC staff economist, who is Emily Burke in this case. So she is responsible for basically all the rest of the questions regarding pricing data and market dynamics. So there's not really much to say about the pricing data. Either you have produced and sold these products, and again, this is only goods shipments, commercial shipments to unrelated U.S. purchasers of goods that were produced by your firm in your U.S. facilities. If you had imports or anything like that, or resales of these goods, you don't report them, somebody else does. I will point out that right now in the draft, unlike the rest of the questionnaire where they've been asking for tons, here they're asking for pounds. Presumably that is because they think that the product groupings here are small enough that tons might throw them off. The values are in dollars rather than thousands of dollars, unlike the rest of the questionnaire, pretty much for the same reason. We have the 5 products. Please pay close attention. They may very well change those 5 products when they issue the final questionnaire based on comments we filed, based on information they believe that they have discovered from reading the press, from their industry expert, that sort of thing. They will most likely, as they requested in the cover letter, they will probably ask for proposed pricing product definitions for heat exchange, kitchen appliance. So the odds are that there will be 7 products by the time the final questionnaire comes out, because the ITC staff does not like to ask less, they like to ask more. Moving on, they're going to ask you to describe how did you come up with the pricing data. Do you keep track of it in the ordinary course of business? Did you have to fly it through a special sales report? very basic, straightforward sorts of things. We have a number of questions here, again, very fact-based. How do you set prices? Right? You have contracts, you have price lists. Right? Again, when it comes to price lists, we tend to construe this very narrowly. That is, if you are issuing price lists to external customers, whether they have discounts or not, then that is plainly something we have to bring forward. If you are using internal price lists that no one outside of the company is supposed to see, we don't usually submit those. So that's where we go. They are asking, do we have specific mechanisms if the cost of the LME does this? Does that affect your price? So do you have built-in price adjusters? Do you simply negotiate the price? Does it swing? All of these are basically what they're going through here. They're asking kind of oddly about your conversion costs, your non-aluminum costs. I say it's odd because usually this is a question the accountant asks rather than the economist, but it's showing up more or less here. Typically, this question 4.3c usually comes out from the staff accountant after he's looked at your accounting data. So they're sort of beating him to the punch. Question subpart D here is again, do you have a formal benchmark that causes prices to move? Discount policy, 1%, 10, 2%, 10, 0.5%, nothing. A lot of times it may very well be based on how much they purchase, either in dollar amount or quantity amount. And as is frequently the case, we match, other people's prices, including subject imports. Typical sales terms, you deliver, quote, delivered, FOB, so where, breakdown of what types of contracts you use. So please, again, I'm looking at 4.6, where they give very specific definitions of contracts which probably do not meet or are probably not consistent with what you all ordinarily think of, and they never really define what they mean by a contract, right? We basically think of contract as an enforceable agreement, as opposed to something formal, in writing, signed, countersigned, that sort of thing. But, it is really how you guys keep track of it, how you think of it. I've never really heard of anybody at the ITC coming in and saying, darn, that should have been reported as a short-term contract rather than an annual one. These sorts of things don't happen. Again, you'll see a question that sort of asks you to try and highlight the main types of provisions in your contracts, regardless of whether you have them. Now we have questions on lead time, transportation costs, where do you ship? My least favorite question is 411A on the end uses. What type of end use does it go into, and what is its share of the total cost? I hate this question because it's not clear. Do they mean, a battleship, which incorporates an aluminum extrusion, or do they mean the structural component that went into the battleship that includes it? Again, the concept that we are trying to convey to the commission, which is that the aluminum extrusion, in the grand scheme of things, the battleship, the football stadium, it's just not a big deal. But for the people who are supplying the extrusions, the dealers, the end users, the OEMs, whoever they are, for them it's very important, and very small price differences will cause them to shift suppliers. It's kind of tough to fit into here, but that is sort of the concept that we're trying to get across to them. Have there been any changes in end uses, and do you anticipate them? Here they're trying to pick up, sort of an example would be if they had asked you right before, say, cell phones, the cell phone towers came out, there might be some brand new product that is suddenly leading to increased demand, or conversely, a new product comes out and it destroys the demand for extrusion. So that's sort of what they're trying to get at here. And again, it's going to be fact-based. Substitutes for aluminum extrusions, my guess is from your perspective as aluminum extruders, there is no replacement. But for your customers, it's entirely possible that there is. And so, again, this is a fact-based sort of thing, and it may very well be specific to the particular type of extruders and customers that you're selling to. But again, from your perspective, it may very well be that, hey, there is no substitutability because I produce aluminum extrusions. If they want something else, they're going to somebody else. Okay, availability of supply. One very much hopes that the subject imports have fallen out of the market, that U.S. produced product has increased. I anticipate that there may have been some increase in non-subject, but hopefully not as much as the Chinese, and hopefully not as aggressively priced as the Chinese. Anticipated changes, well, again, fact-based, what you guys perceive, but more or less, one would anticipate that there would be a large increase in subject imports if the orders go away, and if the orders go away, there will be a smaller decrease in non-subject imports. Okay, finishing, this is kind of a odd question, but I guess it's really trying to figure out the role of subcontractors in the market. So if you could no longer produce and finish a particular type of aluminum extrusion, would your customers then buy the unfinished version of it and hire subcontractors directly? Okay. Demand trends, again, very fact-based and may very well be specific to the markets you're selling to, the customers you're selling to, even though they're asking about the broader aluminum extrusions market to the extent you have knowledge, inside, outside. We're seeing into the future. I hope you have all brought your crystal balls. They ask about product changes. Again, there's the technical question. Have alloys changed? Have the products themselves changed? Are there new types of products, new form, shapes, etc.? Odds are probably not too many. Product mix. I suspect that for most of you guys, product mix changes month to month, and so it's rare that product mix changes are significant, but again, very fact-based. Let us know. Marketing is, again, one of your opportunities to talk about the role of the Chinese in the market before the order came into effect and what you anticipate it would be afterwards, because it does affect your marketing. Leads to lower prices, more aggressive sales efforts, that they are going after your customers. And so marketing is certainly one of the things that we anticipate would be affected, was affected, and would be affected. Business cycles, again, very fact-specific to each of you, but they are generally looking for something that says we are out of step with the general economy. And we are out of step with the general economy because we respond to these factors rather than the overall economy. Not one of the bigger things. Conditions of competition, changes in the conditions of competition, as we discussed, the absence of the Chinese impacts the conditions of competition. Supply constraints, This is probably unlikely in the extrusions market, but again, the respondents like this question because they like to say, you guys refuse to sell to me, and so therefore I am forced to import. We like to let the Commission know that there are any number of reasons why you might refuse, decline, or not accept an order from someone. They may be a terrible credit risk. They may be guys who sued you. It may very well be that, they called up and tried to order, as I once had one guy call up one of our clients and try to order a year's worth of production for the delivery the following month. Now, our client's response in that one was, hey, let me get on the phone and talk to my other guys in my group, and we can do that for you. And they hung up. So they like to do that, but that's where you go. What impact does raw material prices have on your extrusions, and how does it impact your selling prices? You may have noticed this is a common theme. They've asked you, do you have automatic adjusters? Do you have semi-automatic adjusters? How do you set your prices? And once again, they're back to it. And so you got that. Price comparisons, again, what they're trying to get at is the U.S. a high-priced market? Do we anticipate that they would have an economic incentive to send additional aluminum extrusions here because we have high prices? Market studies, well, maybe you do, maybe you know about them, maybe you don't. Please send them to us before you send them to them. Export constraints, most typically the biggest constraint that we run into these days is that we just can't compete with the Chinese in markets where they're, not subject to dumping duties. But if you are aware of tariffs, if you are aware of quotas, if you are aware of limitations, if you are aware of country-specific specifications that are just so out of the mainstream that nobody else produces for it, fill us in. Again, barriers to trade is basically the same sort of question, but this one goes to more formal constraints, AD duties, CVD duties, 201. Question 424, interchangeability. Please pay particular attention to the last part of that question, i.e., can they physically be used in the same applications? So, if you have, say, an extruded aluminum profile from China and an extruded aluminum profile from the United States, can you use it where you would use the same profile? And given that the question is, can they physically be used in the same sorts of applications, the answer is almost always yes. That is the point of having all of these alloy grades and specifications. Factors other than price is the companion question, and we find that for most U.S. producers, there is very little benefit these days to being domestic as compared to being an importer. But you may find that S is perhaps a more appropriate one for you, that sometimes they're significant. Again, we want to downplay this, but you got to be consistent with what you believe and not what we would like. So now this gets us to our favorite, part 5, which is where they ask you to subdivide all the data you previously reported into subdivisions or all other aluminum extrusions, which is what we reported, but for heat exchange systems and kitchen appliance components, which once again were defined all the way back on pages 2 through 5. So again, the first part of this, 5.1A through E, F. Okay, this is from the investigator and will be used by the ITC lawyer to determine if this is part of the same like product or a separate like product. And so all of the factors you see in 5.1A through F are legal factors. Please just respond to them truthfully. And now, typically our approach here, and you will let us know, is to say, obviously, once an extrusion has been produced, it's really only substitutable with, identical extrusions, right? If I need a hollow profile, but I have extruded a bar, I'm not going to be able to substitute one for the other. But before the order is placed, I might well be able to substitute my production capacity between heat exchange systems, kitchen appliance components, and all my other aluminum extrusions without any problem. And so that's sort of what we're trying to get at. But, physical characteristics and music, well, they're all made from aluminum, right? They're all extruded. We could make them all from the same thing. So whatever comparability we have in terms of these things, and we want to say they're as comparable as we can justify, right? I mean, again, once it's produced, it may not be that interchangeable, but before it's produced and we're just talking about the order, you all might very well be able to do it. The manufacturing facilities, production process, employees, again, we're hoping that most of this is shared, but you guys are going to have to tell us what the answer is. Channels of distribution, please remember that so far our channels of distribution are resellers and end users. So hopefully there will be a lot of overlap there. Perception, again, the discussion goes to, before it's ordered to after it's ordered. I doubt anybody is going to perceive a heat exchange system to be the same as a kitchen appliance component as going to be the same as a hollow tooth. So before that, it's like we view the suppliers as equally capable of providing us any of these products, but plainly once you've produced it, substitution is limited to things that look the same. Presumably,
hey, Derek and Paul, this is Jeff. I just wanted to jump in. We are basically at the end of our hour. How much more time will you need to go through this?
Actually, since the data questions are exactly the same, limited now only to kitchen appliance components and heat exchange systems, we are basically done.
Yeah. So I mean, we just want to go through just real quickly what we'll need from you. This is a questionnaire for everybody that's on the phone and that has not provided us a list of your top 10 companies. The top 10 customers. Please provide that to us directly to rdfrancesco@willeyrine.com. We're going to provide that information to the ITC. We're going to be updating the ITC with that information. So please provide that.
The ITC will be using that information to identify purchasers who will receive a purchaser's questionnaire.
And we can open up the floor for questions if you have time.
Are there any questions?
I think we stunned them.
Okay. Well, let me make a couple of comments here. the webinar we've gone through has been recorded, so we will be uploading it to the AEC website along with copies of the questionnaires. Please do take notice, and we'll make this clear on the webpage that these are drafts at this point, but they're drafts with some level of confidence. And you can continue with any questions that you may have, and then what we can do is put you in contact on the webpage. We'll have the contact information for Robert and Derek or Paul. I'm not sure if you're on that list, but you probably are, and I think Rebecca Woodings was added as well. She helped us last time.
Yeah, you should be on that list.
Okay. You may have a question here. If you have a question, it would be better to type it in because we're trying to have a certain, is that the way? Checking with my IT guy. Can we type
Yeah,
that
that's what
question?
we typically do, but we can unmute Jason if you want to.
Okay, well, we've got a question for Jason Weber. Let's go ahead and unmute for him then. All right, Jason, go right ahead.
Hey, good afternoon. I was just curious, so on the heat exchanger systems, is that making the full heat exchanger? Because obviously as SAPA, we operate a facility that makes the tubing that goes into the heat exchanger system. We don't typically, or we haven't counted that tubing underneath our extrusion data in the past.
Okay, so I hate to punt, but I have to go with the specific definition of heat exchange systems that's indicated on page 4. I mean, and looking at that, yeah, it sounds like you, at least from what I heard you say, it sounds like you are producing heat exchange systems as they defined it. And so it sounds like it will be necessary for you to separate that out. And again, that's going to be reported in Part 5. And you will need to allocate between, or allocate to the extent necessary to heat exchange systems, you know, whatever shared costs you have. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, very well then. Paul, Derek, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in to share your knowledge and expertise on this. If you do have any questions, feel free. You can even email to me, but I'll just be forwarding it on to Wiley Rain. I do want folks on the line to be aware that you should not send any information to AEC or me personally having to do with your questionnaires. The council cannot be a part of this. This needs to be between your company and our attorneys at Wiley Rain. So if you find that you're kind of stuck and not sure where to go, you can give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'll be sure we can connect you with the right people. Look for the updates on the website. Should happen by at least middle part of tomorrow, and we should have everything ready to go. One last question I'd have, Paul or Derek, when do you expect to see the final questionnaire?
Well, we expect to see the final questionnaire by the end of October. They usually like to give companies at least a month to prepare. So we'll expect that at the end of October. And if companies can submit a draft of the questionnaire, we can review those, and hopefully we can get those by November 15th, which gives them about 2 weeks. So they can kind of start on the draft questionnaire, and then once we get the final one with all of the changes that the ITC makes, they can just kind of update that questionnaire and then provide it to us by November 15th.
Okay. Thanks for that answer. All right, very well. Well, thank you, everybody. And again, thank you, Paul and Derek. And we'll talk to everybody real soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.